Human progress, attitudes of the future, more accurate view of the world. Forgive me if I don't believe that necessarily. So every year, North Dakota State University puts out the Student Freedom, Progress, and Flourishing Survey. I forget exactly how long it's been going on, but they recently released it this year, and I saw it come up a couple of times in the news. And one of the reasons I'm going to talk about this is, as I've said many times, where we train the next generation of scientists is often in the university. And so what's going on in the university and the health of things there is important. And that's where I get into something interesting with this. Where's it? The annual survey. There's a few questions that were asked. Growing concerns about free speech and lack of viewpoint diversity in higher education. We asked our students a range. This questions assess. Majority of students perceive that the climate is generally open to sharing, or however, there are wide disparities with different ideologies. More conservative political ideology are less likely to perceive the classroom climate as being one that is open to independent viewpoints. That's actually pretty well known already. So the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education also does a yearly survey of free speech and academic freedom on campuses. And they've found this for many years, that there are many colleges that do not, where conservatives in particular do not feel like they can speak out freely. Like their views could be respected, or that the college is interested in a diverse set of viewpoints. So let's get into it. Not all bad, but I'm going to say that I'm going to ultimately conclude with this being a bit of a mixed bag, because I don't think... How do I put this? Well, let's just go through it, because I think it might be a little bit better if I go in here and get into some of this. So, majority of students are comfortable sharing opinions on controversial topics in class. Okay. 66% are comfortable liberal leaning. Conservatives are not. No, speaking as someone who isn't conservative on an academic campus myself, although I'm an academic and not a student, I don't necessarily feel comfortable right now. I would fall into the majority of conservatives with that one. And this is the thing, it is very partisan driven. And it's been, my observation, having been on university campus now probably in some capacity for good on 10 or 12 years, I think this is a fairly accurate representation, because I think the campus itself is generally more liberal leaning, and perhaps not liberal as much as left, and there is a difference. Majority of students say professors create a climate that allows diverse views. This is no surprise. This I don't think is too much of a surprise either. Most conservatives are not. When you get in there and you get to know some professors, then you get to know that a lot of them will be okay with you talking if you're comfortable with pushing back. I don't know that there's necessarily all that many professors anymore. Well, it's difficult for me to say with this one. Is there a lot of professors that promote having constructive disagreement and conflict management and those kinds of topics? I don't know. So things like Heterodox Academy is filled with professors who promote that, who want to see constructive disagreement, actually, and try to promote it in their day-to-day activities. I don't know that that's necessarily the case here with the majority of professors. So Heterodox Academy has a little over 5,000 members now, and I don't think that's the majority of faculty in the U.S. That's certainly not the majority of faculty in the U.S., I don't think. I do not know that number off the top of my head, so please feel free to fact check me. Majority of students say professors, I should have waited. Should have encouraged diverse viewpoints and perspectives. See, it's interesting. I don't know that it is a decent sized sample, I think. Actually, no. They don't put the actual sample size here. Interesting. I don't know. Because the thing about it is if there's a viewpoint push if the professor pushes their own viewpoint on the class and doesn't allow the students to have that back and forth themselves and encourage other students who come from minority viewpoints. Here's a good way to put it. Professors, I don't think, are necessarily the best facilitators. Because the majority of them are not necessarily trained as teachers. There's a difference between being a professor and doing research all the time and teaching, and this is speaking, I've had experience in both. Not all professors are great teachers. Not all professors are great at doing the facilitation to flush out the ideas and being able to get people to who with minority viewpoints to feel comfortable speaking up. And so that's a big difference, I think, here. I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that there's professors encouraging diverse viewpoints, but again, this kind of number and these kinds of numbers here don't surprise me, because I do think a lot of the colleges and universities, and the one I'm on in particular nowadays, lean a lot more left. Not liberal as much as left. This is the thing. Liberal and left don't necessarily mean the same thing, because I would argue somebody on the political left is not the same as a leftist, as a classical liberal anymore. And so that's the thing, is they probably need to update this and actually look a little bit more carefully at some of the definitions that they're using here, but we'll go with it for now. Majority of the students say unpopular views are welcome in the classroom. Again, this goes back to conservatives not feeling like they can share their views, because in typical fashion, I do think there is a left-leaning bias on a lot of college campuses myself, and so many conservative views are not welcome necessarily on a college campus. And I will say it, I've gotten a lot more heckling for being conservative than I ever have for being a climate scientist. Students differ about how often professors promote their political views in the classroom. That's interesting by itself, that the different students would say that, because like it's the majority of conservatives say it's somewhere, and even the majority of the liberal students would actually say, and majority, well, this could be redone here, because you could say that actually this whole this all chunk right here. All right, I'm going to say at North Dakota State University, this was a piss poor job of constructing your color bars. Anyway, this would make more sense as being the never color rather than some of these colors here. But anyway, this is the vast majority say that the professors, to some degree, promote their own political views. And that's kind of concerning that professors are promoting their own political views at all when they're teaching a course. Which, in my view, they should not be doing that. They should be allowing the students to form their own opinions. Introduce them to new opinions, absolutely, but don't promote your own as being the right thing. Majority say should not disinvite controversial speakers. Hey, great! Let's have controversial speakers on campus. Question: define who's controversial. That's my follow-on question to the students here, because there's a lot of reasons that surveys can have problems here. What a conservative defines as a controversial speaker is not necessarily going to be the same as what a liberal or a leftist defines as a controversial speaker. For example, I mean, there's been people shouted down like Ben Shapiro, or even some of the most milquetoast mainstream conservatives that have been shouted down and had protests at their different things that I would argue are not necessarily anywhere near as controversial as, say, an Alex Jones is. But at the same time, some of the most controversial people for conservatives, they necessarily wouldn't push them away and say that they can't speak. So this is my question again with the students here. Define controversial. You know? How do these students define controversial? Because that's not given here, and that matters in the context of this question of whether or not a student would say, disinvite them. If you gave them a definition, you know, and this is the thing here, I haven't seen where the questions are yet, but if they gave an example of this person is a controversial, this person is not, kind of thing, or what you need to give a definition, because right now you're just relying on the students and whatever their definition is, and so that's not necessarily meaningful. Again, also one other thing that bothers me, where the hell are the error bars? NDSU, come on, where are the error bars here? I would like to know what kind of spread this is, what the variability of the students were in here for each of these categories, but you don't have it there. Should not drop readings that students strongly disagree with. Exactly. This is no surprise here. I agree with this, and I think it's good that all the students pretty much said this. Majority of students say should not drop readings that make students uncomfortable. That's also, I'm fine with that. This is a little bit less, which we're going to get into that. Majority of students do not support dropping discussion concepts that make students feel uncomfortable. Again, I'm fine with that. You're supposed to be exposed to new ideas. This is a good thing. Majority of students say they should be reported for making comments that students find offensive. This is, okay, first thing. How do these students define offensive? Is somebody accidentally using the wrong pronouns offensive? Is it somebody using a vulgarity? Is it somebody using ad hominem attacks and things like that? That's, what is offensive here? Because if offensive is accidentally misgendering someone, or using the wrong pronouns, as it were, or saying something minor, really, really minor, that could be worked out really well, if they sat down to talk to each other, you wonder why some professors and people walk on eggshells, because what is offensive now is so slight. It can be so slight and so minimal that you're going to report to the university anything that the students that you find offensive. But what's offensive? And this is why I wonder, are you really for diverse viewpoints if you're this high in the offensive category and your threshold of what is offensive is really low? You know what I mean? So this is why I wonder, how accurate that first question is on their desire to have diverse viewpoints, or the encouragement of diverse viewpoints, is when somebody may have a diverse viewpoint that you find offensive, you're going to report them? Then do you really want diverse viewpoints? So this is why I got to say, what the hell is offensive here in this particular commentary? I really don't know. I don't have an answer to that. Stay a student should, same thing. Are you going to be reporting on your student on each other? This is something that pisses me off. Colleges are not doing a good job of preparing students for life. When you go into a science career, you have to be able to take offense at something, because the thing is, when you get peer reviews back, sometimes they're not nice. I've gotten a couple of really nasty peer reviews for journal articles that I've written. I fought back and I managed to get them published. But you got to be able to not take offense at something when somebody really critiques your argument. They're not necessarily attacking you personally, although sometimes that has happened to me too. They are trying to attack your argument, and critique your argument and show you the fundamental errors and things like that. And so if the threshold of what's offensive, according to these students, is really, really low, and they go into a science field, are you going to be able to handle the argumentation and debate that goes on in science that makes science as good as it is? So, serious question. What is offensive? How do you define something that's offensive? To you, or to, are you judging it based on, again, are you a fan of the microaggressions, which, by the way, the research with respect to microaggressions shows that most microaggressions are not exactly microaggressions at all to anybody. Watch the Is Diversity Training Really Effective video. It's in there when I was talking about that. But that's concerning, because those kind of biased response teams, that's where these kinds of biased response teams come up. Is people say, yeah, it's offensive, should be reported to university. What the hell is offensive? Not every little emotion you have is valid. Not every experience necessarily translates to racism or something like that. That you can process that through your worldview. Again, your worldview, it helps you define a little bit of what you find offensive. Your worldview and your values. Here, so let's see. Student report says something that other students find offensive, should that student be reported. Students who are not comfortable sharing an opinion on a controversial topic, 50-50. Students who are comfortable sharing opinion on a controversial topic. Again, controversial. We might agree on what is that, but the student says something that other students who believe that professors create a climate that allows diverse views. See, this is interesting. So, if you believe the professor creates a climate where diverse views are allowed, but then you immediately want to report something the student says that's offensive, are you really interested in diverse views, or do you just have a really low threshold for what is offensive? These kinds of surveys bug me because they're not going far enough to say to ask students, how is your threshold for what is offensive changed? You know, and probably with some of the things of coddling people, with keeping them safe from things that they don't want to hear, not allowing viewpoints to be expressed because they are offensive to somebody, and protecting people's fragile sensibilities. This is where I wonder, just like, are you really interested in diverse views if you're willing to report a student for something that you find offensive? Yeah, and this is no surprise to see the reverse of this here. See, if students who believe professors create a climate that evolves. Yeah, it's the same thing here. Human progress, attitudes of the future, more accurate view of the world. Forgive me if I don't believe that necessarily. I'm sorry. If you go back to the video early in this channel's history on elitism and empathy, I talked about this a lot, in that there is a lot of people who go into academia, they never work a menial job in their life. They never go out there and actually experience the real world. Probably one of the best things I did for myself when I was in college was to do the service trip to go help out in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, because it gave you a lot of a real world perspective on what people actually experience. College does not give you an accurate view of the real world, in my opinion. It often shelters and gives you a view of the world that is from high above here in your lofty perch with degrees, and is tended to communicate a whole thing of elitism. I know better than you because I have the degree. No, you don't. Get that attitude out of your... If you're a student watching this, get that attitude out of your head, because you don't know a goddamn thing. If that's the case, it does not help you get a more accurate view of the state of the world, I don't think. Because, I mean, you're not going out there and actually experiencing the world. You're sitting in a classroom reading about it, reading books, reading studies and things from other people. No. Get out there and experience it. Get out of college and experience it. The fact of the matter, here's what I would say to you, is if you're going into high school, if you're just out of high school and you're going to college, don't go to college right out of high school. Don't go to college right out of high school. Do service work for a year. Work for a year. Get a job. Actually work in the real world for a while. And then go to college. And I say this for two reasons. A, it'll help you develop an understanding of finances and fiscal responsibility, so you're not taking a degree that is useless. Necessarily, because I do think there are some degrees that are just utterly useless. But you can then also get a better sense of what the world is actually like. Talk with people who don't have college degrees about their lives. Learn from those people. Learn from talking with others. Not necessarily just from going to college and getting a degree and hearing from people with other degrees about how the world is according to them. Because it not necessarily is. If I'm laughing hysterically at that, that's because no. World has gotten better. So if you're talking about undergrads, you're talking about people who haven't even turned 20 yet. And given the state, we talked about this in the other video about how many students are proficient in science and what have you, and there was a thing of history there. A lot of them aren't proficient in science when they're going into high school. So I don't know that I trust this to necessarily be accurate. Because I think the K-12 education system has done a horrible job. And even quarter students are optimistic about the future of the world. No wonder! I'm just speaking about it from the climate change thing. You're telling people the world is going to end in 12 years if you believe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which, for the record, she got that report completely wrong. That's a whole other video I can talk about a whole other day. But Yeah, but when you're pumping them up with all the negatives, like the world sucks, there's all this thing here, this thing here, you can't succeed. When you're doing that, yeah, of course, the future of the world is disoptimistic. Here's what I see in all that. So that's, of course, very concerning. You're not doing anything to empower students that they can actually succeed and change things, I don't think here. Majority of students say professors inspire them to... Interesting. Well, comes to the individuality of the students. I think possibly that you run into professors that really do inspire you, really do make you think, really do make you feel hopeful for the world. Okay, so good on that. Good on that. If professors are successful doing that. Yeah, I don't think so. Sorry, I don't think so. That goes back to the other one about the accurate view of the world. Few students say college is given... No shit. My gosh. I would be curious of, why they have a more negative view or why they have a more positive view of the U.S. Again, I do really worry that colleges are more interested in telling people what to think instead of how to think. Same with K through 12. And so, people pushing their opinion of how bad the U.S. is. I'm very much in board with the idea of you want to teach all of history. And then I want the students to make their own judgment, good or bad. And just like you have with people make mistakes and they err. Does that mean you get rid of all the good things that they did? Countries in there, the U.S. did have some pretty damn shitty things we did at the start. But that doesn't negate all the good things that we've done. It doesn't negate all the progress toward racial equality or any of the other number of different things or all the technological innovation. Think of all the incredible things that have been invented in the United States and along the lines there. So this is the thing, is I would rather people get the facts about what happened in history, what the U.S. has done, and good and bad, and make their own judgment. But I don't think colleges are necessarily interested in doing that. Students differ about whether life has improved over the last 50 years. I don't know that I want to bother with that because at best these are students, if they're undergraduate students, which I didn't catch it if they were, if these are undergraduate students, they are 20 at most. 20 or 21 at most of them when they're taking this. So I don't know that they have the best view of the world, again, because I don't think K through 12 education has served them well about history. Again, same thing. If you're pushing all the negative stuff that is out there and pushing it constantly negative, yeah, of course they're not going to be optimistic. Majority of professors inspire them. Oh, that's good. Have students optimistic about their future. Okay. This, again, I would love to see that this be more optimistic. But I'm not surprised that it's this low because, again, if you are constantly pushing bad, all sorts of things going on are bad and being flooded with media that says, the world is horrible. The world is horrible. You have no future. There is a thing called climate anxiety that they diagnosed, or it's eco-anxiety that they diagnosed, and psychologists have diagnosed with kids in Europe, where they think the world's going to end. They think they have no future because they think the world's going to end because of climate change, and that's not entirely accurate. About a quarter of students do not believe they are able to make a difference in the world. Oh, that's lovely. I don't honestly know what to say with that one, and I'd be curious what others have to think because, this is actually pretty even across the students and their political leanings. So this is curious here, but, I do want to say that I don't think colleges do a good job of, and it's probably not their purpose, actually, now to think about it, but promoting individual empowerment, promoting the attitude that you can do something, that you don't have control over everything that necessarily happens to you, but you do have control over how you react to it. In the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, it says, there's a line in there about, something that happens to you that's a result of others isn't your fault, but it is still your responsibility, and it's still your responsibility because you control entirely how you react to it and what you do next. And I don't think these students have necessarily been taught that. And maybe that's probably not the job of the university or the K through 12 system to do, as much as it's the job of the parents to do, and parents have not necessarily done that. So you can see I'm going to spread some blame around here where I think about it. Less than half of students say college is... Group of students is perceptive about that, because I do agree that I don't think college is necessarily giving them a lot of the skills that they need to solve problems. Slight majority... This is terrifying. Thank you. This is terrifying. Again, if you're promulgating entirely only the negative about history, it's no surprise that you then come to think that the country is terrible. But you should be teaching the whole of history and showing what's good and what's bad. And I'd say let people come to their own judgment. I am proud to be an American myself. This country has done a lot of damn good things, despite the many nasty and negative things that have happened. So I'm very proud to be an American. Economics and entrepreneurship. Okay, I don't think that's necessarily relevant for where we're going here, but I do want to go back up real quick, because I talked about this in the peril of politicizing science, the notion of shutting down viewpoints with which one disagrees. And I know there's also been a discussion that's happened on Twitter of late, that you shouldn't ban critical race theory. I think the naming of banning critical race theory is a little bit too far, because a lot of the bills in the state legislatures don't outright ban and say you can't teach critical race theory. What they're saying more so, or what they're trying to do, in a lot of interpretation, is to say you cannot teach it as gospel fact, but rather as a way of looking at the world. So you can teach about it objectively. This is what it is, and this is what some people believe. And let other people come to their own conclusions. But what you're not allowed to do is say, this is the way you have to view the world. And that, I think, is fair, to say that teachers cannot force students to think a certain way. They're supposed to teach how to think, not what to think, here. And you should not be forcing them to think about what the world is in terms of critical race theory or critical theory. No, they should come to that themselves. And so I think that's what they're trying to do. And it comes back to the idea with the diversity viewpoints in here and all of that. Again, I think, where is the one at the top? Majority say unpopular opinions are welcome in the classroom. Do your professors encourage... Yeah, there's a few questions I would have here now, given some of the fungibility of language, of the English language, and the things going on with critical theory and the rest, that I would have to ask a couple of questions with this. What do you mean by diverse viewpoint? Which, in the sense of, is it okay if someone disagrees with your premise to begin with, or are you going to be offended? Or does somebody have to disagree with your premise, but agree with your premise, but they think about it a different way and what it means? That's the kind of thing. What do you mean by diverse? Do you mean diverse in terms of only skin tone? Do you mean diverse only in terms of skin tone, or in terms of gender, or in terms of sexual orientation, or any number of those kinds of things? Or are you after diverse intellect? Do you mean diverse thought? because again, I think there was another video I recorded earlier today that was, on the experience of on the authority of experience in Black thought, was commenting on that piece, and the notion there that that experience determines thought. That's not necessarily true, because two people of the same race, sex, gender, what have you, can have completely different thoughts about something or about an experience that they had. And two people who are completely different can have exactly the same thoughts about a similar experience. So it's not necessarily, true that diversity of skin tone will give you diversity of thought anymore. So it's very difficult here to say what they're thinking about when it is diverse. And the reason it's a concern is, if diverse doesn't include disagreeing premises, that's not necessarily good for students that go into science. You need to be able to have disagreeing premises be allowed. Otherwise, you can't have good science. You will have, again, what I said the other day, totalitarian science. So that's where I get into some of this is a bit more interesting. And so, again, what is diverse here? And what is controversial? When it comes to speakers in particular, what is controversial? Yeah. What do you mean by controversial speaker? Again, ask the students that question. And what do the students mean by diverse? I don't think they bother asking these questions. They just put the buzzword diverse or controversial or offensive. And they don't actually probe what students think those words mean or what they would define as offensive. And that's a big deal, because there is a gap right now between conservatives and liberals, or I should say conservatives, liberals, and left, really, because there's a third group in there. And part of it is with not having a common definition or having a fundamental disagreement on how things should be with respect to those definitions. And we're not navigating those that well, and not necessarily teaching students to be receptive and figure out how to navigate those things. Again, like conflict management and understanding communication styles and all sorts of different things need to be in there, I think. But let me go back down here. Yeah, this is the last one. Offensive. Again, what is diverse? What do you define as diversity with respect to viewpoints? What do you define as offensive? Because I don't think these two groups necessarily think that those are the same things. I really don't think that. And I don't see I didn't see something in here that would show that. And I don't know that there's been any social science research done to show that these two groups think about those terms differently. And that's actually a fundamental gap in research. Now that I think about it, if a scientific community hadn't done a damn thing with it, there you go. There's your next free research question. But I think that would be really, really helpful in the divide that we face right now, because when you're dealing with science and multidisciplinary efforts in particular, I do a lot of multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary research myself, in that you have to have common definitions for things. You have to have a common bond of language and reach the same conclusion. And a lot of these surveys where these kind of buzzwords are out here don't seem to have that. But you have to be able to navigate in a science career those kinds of differences of language and jargon, and the definitions of what things are. And you also have to be able to handle it when somebody disagrees with you tremendously, and I have a hard time with that, I fully admit. But if you can't, because your threshold of what's offensive is so low, or you haven't been taught some level of resilience, or you haven't learned some level of resilience, I don't know how you deal with that. And so this is actually really concerning that people would want to snitch, but we also don't even know what is meant by offensive here. And not necessarily teaching people how to resolve those things when they're bothered either. And so that's concerning. So overall, this leaves me, quasi-hopeful, quasi-concerned when it comes to what does this mean as students go from undergraduate into STEM disciplines or into science careers, soft science or hard science careers. So that's kind of three questions I would finish on that I have in this. What do you mean by diverse for the students who did this? What do you mean by diverse? And hey, answer these questions. Here you go. Answer these questions in the comments. I would be curious to hear your responses. What do you mean by diverse? What is a diverse view to you? What do you mean by controversial speaker? And if you need to use examples, I'm fine with that. And what is offensive? Okay. That's my kind of curiosity question to know. I'd be curious to hear the answers. So if you like this video, like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good jazz. If you'd like more interaction with me, head over and become a supporter of SciWorthy.locals.com. There, it's only $3 a month, and that goes actually to charity, so you'd be helping out and support nonpartisan science journalism, so I hope you do that. That's it for now. Until next time, I'm Adrienne signing off. I hope you stay curious, my friends.